I want to talk about my perspective when it comes to the graph and an update when it comes to it, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Now, first of all, the graph not too long ago made a post saying how yesterday wasn't just the graph's birthday event. They say how it was a working session with some of the leading voices in AI and infrastructure from Google, something like Coinbase, and you also take a look at some others, but also at the same time, they were basically discussing what's going to come next. I find this pretty cool. Now, it's not because of the birthday event, right? I mean, personally, I have not celebrated my birthday in a very long time, but I'm just saying it is pretty cool seeing this kind of event nonetheless, because when I take a look at those names right there, something like Google, something like Coinbase, I think that right there seems to be pretty impressive to me. And also on top of that, when I take a look at Coinbase, sure, I mean, it hasn't really been kind of talked about that much, but still, it's in the S&P 500, and again, it's just very massive overall. So yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I find this pretty impressive. Now, people may be thinking, well, how does this even matter? Because they say that when it comes to GRT, which is the graph's native token, by the way, but that is actually currently around 43 times lower than $2. So clearly people like to say, oh, it's not hypothetically doing the best and all this type of stuff. I'm totally aware of that. But in the meantime, though, I do like what I'm seeing when it comes to the graph, because some other projects out there, they literally cannot even do an event to begin with. This is just my perspective. Like, literally, some of them I've seen, they announce that they're going to be ceasing operations and all this type of stuff, which is, it is what it is. I mean, what can I do about it? But I'm just saying, at least the graph is still hypothetically sticking around in my perspective. And because my thing is basically $2 cost average, if let's say the price, or should I say the market cap or whatever, kind of that vibe isn't doing the best, I'm not going to complain about that, because my intention, again, is $2 cost average. But that's just my point of view. It's like, for instance, let's say I walk inside a store. Like, my intention, if let's say it is to buy a t-shirt or something like that, of course, I wouldn't mind a discount, right? Like, I'm just saying, if I'm trying to buy a t-shirt, I'm not going to complain if there's a discount, if I actually like the t-shirt. However, that's just kind of my analogy when it comes to the t-shirt example. But again, besides that point, when I take a look at GRT, at the hypothetical idea of $2, the market cap, considering current circulating supply, would be around 21 billion. Which some people may be thinking, like, okay, why would I still think about that? Well, the reason why I personally still think about that is because when I take a look at just kind of the mission of the graph, right? When I take a look at what it's trying to do, what I like about it is that it seems to be a project that is not going to be dependent on kind of the trend or just like short-term attention, because the graph, the way I take a look at it, just quite simply, it's literally trying to help developers, the way I view it, increase the efficiency of their application. So if sometimes people like to tell me, oh, there are so many developers, arriving on the scene, right? If there are so many developers making applications, isn't that a bad thing when it comes to the graph? Now, my kind of perception is, why would that be a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing, actually, because if there's more developers and the graph's basically entire mission, the way you take a look at it, is to help developers increase the efficiency of their application, and there's actually more of what they're trying to help, why would that be a bad thing? I just don't get it. I actually would think that it would hypothetically be a pretty good thing. But that's just my kind of perception when it comes to this. Now, of course, I could go a little bit more in depth when it comes to the graph, and I already talked about that in my previous videos, but I'm just saying, quite simply put, if it's trying to help developers basically with their applications, I find it pretty interesting. And the thing is, we take a look at how many applications there are as of right now, more specifically within this space, right? And if I'm just kind of hypothetically assuming that there might be more moving forward, I'm not necessarily saying that every single project is going to just, gravitate towards the graph, or like every developer or something like that. But I'm just saying, when I take a look at something like its mission, I don't think it's something that is kind of just temporary, because some other projects out there, if they're so tied to a certain trend, what happens if that trend is no longer trending or no longer trendy? What's going to happen to the future of the project? Who knows? That's just my point of view. But then, because the graph isn't necessarily like that, like, it just doesn't seem like it's going to go with the trends. Now, I'm totally aware that it is not impervious to what is going on right now when it comes to the altcoin space, because GRT is not doing the best and the altcoin space also isn't doing the best. I'm totally aware of that. However, in terms of fundamentals, it is not something that arguably I think only follows the trend, because it is not designed in the beginning to follow the trend. You know what I mean? Some other projects out there, they're literally designed from the ground up to literally be focused on a certain trend, whatever that may be. Something that's like, cool or interesting at that time. It is literally designed around that. But what happens if something that is literally designed around something and that something no longer becomes a trend, So then I like the graph because it seems a little bit more evergreen in terms of their focus. When we take a look at evergreen content, it's like, for instance, how to change car tires, right? Like that content, like people searched it like 10 years ago, and hypothetically 10 years later, are people still going to be looking at how to change their tires? Hypothetically, I would assume, presumably, yes. So it seems like evergreen in that sense, where the graph, since it's trying to help developers, basically, we saw developers years ago, and we're still seeing many developers right now, and hypothetically, if there's going to be more moving forward, it wouldn't surprise me either. So this is why I'm still a fan when it comes to the graph. Now, personally, I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but then at the same time, I like their mission. That's just my point of view. And again, when they make a birthday event, I am pretty, flattered actually seeing that, because I actually can see from this photo that they have like, cupcakes, and there's like the graph logo. I do like the icing though, because personally, my favorite part of the cupcake is the icing. That's just my point of view. I mean, after the icing is done, I just can't be bothered sometimes to eat the rest of the cupcake, but that's just kind of me. But you know what? I still do it sometimes. But yeah, besides that point, when I take a look at something like, the graph, kind of my perception is that I know that it's not going to be the most popular project out there. I know that it's not going to be the most famous, but does it really need to? I mean, I don't think so. That's just my point of view. Not every single project is like supposed to be like a top 10 or top 20. Just by design, some projects out there, because the way the project is built, or let's say because of the certain niche that the project is focused on, sometimes there might be hypothetically a ceiling, right? But then I don't necessarily mind when it comes to the graph, because if we take a look at, again, GRT is around 43 times lower than $2. Like Bitcoin with the pullback, it's not over 4 times lower than 300 grand, and it's actually never even reached 300 grand. That's just my point of view. If we take a look at GRT at the hypothetical idea of maybe $1, I mean, it's still around 20 times lower than $1. Like Ethereum is not over 20 times lower than 10 grand, for instance, but that's just my point of view. But even besides all that, though, I'm just staying patient. I mean, people like to ask me, when is there going to be an altcoin season? I don't have the answer to that question. I cannot control this market in any way. The only thing I can do is control myself. So I'm just still holding and just waiting. And I guess that's pretty much about it. But in the meantime, I did want to talk about this update because I found it to be pretty cool. Or should I say to be pretty interesting? But yeah, it's been Lee the Captain. I'll catch you on the next one. I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you all have a nice day. I'm out. Peace. Bye.